What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another review here at Thomas Opent. And as you can see, I am not alone here right now. I'm joined here today by James from RampantLionReviews, all the way from Sweden, which is, well, you know,
pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you're originally from
Scotland, where
and
this beer is from.
Something to do with the beer we're drinking right now. We're going to review FierceBeer. You know, guys, for you who follow my channel, you know I have a big love for the multi beers from FierceBeer. I haven't had too many of their other beers, but the multi stuff, the barley wines, you know, the stouts, and in this case, the porters are usually on point. We're talking about Imperial Café Racer barrel aged. This has been barrel aged for 9 months in bourbon barrels, and it's coming in at a hefty 9. Wait, am I saying that correctly? 9%, 9% ABV. We've got a 440. We really need to stop doing that for this weekend. It's a 440 milliliter can, so that makes it perfect for a little review like this. It's a small batch edition. They do many of these different small batches, and they always tweak the recipe a little bit, or they add an adjunct, or they take something away. You know, the different barrels, blah blah blah. This is small batch edition 18.1, and I'm thinking that means that the 18 is the batch and the 0.1 is from a certain barrel.
Probably, I would think that's probably about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is quite exciting as well because, you know, being in Sweden, I don't get to review too many Scottish beers these days. And Fierce came along, they really came along quite a bit after I had left Aberdeen. I studied in Aberdeen 2009 to 2014. And of course, that was during the rise of Brewdog. But Fierce, what I would always associate Fierce with would be fruity sours, and the dark beers like this. I mean, Café Racer is one of their core range beers, and this is basically a special version of that, the Café Racer.
I can't check my on tab. I could check my on tab right now. I won't. I'm pretty sure I've had non-barrel aged Café Racer. Don't think I've ever reviewed it, but I do know that I'm very psyched about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, because the one thing for me, it's quite cool to be able to review, to do another FierceBeer review, because I really like these guys. I really rate these guys very highly, and I don't think they've ever released anything through, other than they've maybe had 1 or 2 collaborations through Systembolaget in Sweden. I see 1 or 2 things going through Copenhagen, through Kiosk and stuff like that, but it's usually Very Big Moose, and I've had Very Big Moose.
Oh, I've had Very Big Moose last weekend. That is still one of the classics from FierceBeer, if you ask me.
That's a very good beer, that is a very good beer. And this one, I actually don't know if I've reviewed the original Café Racer.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I honestly don't. I've had Peanut Riot, which is another porter. Peanut Riot's a very good one. And the last beer that I had from these guys was Cranachan Killer. But yeah, no, FierceBeer, I would say, very, very good Scottish brewery, particularly if you're interested in stouts, porters, and fruity sours. I've never had like a West Coast IPA from these guys, or a lager, or a New England IPA.
Do they do
it's
West Coast?
I honestly don't know. I don't remember ever seeing one from these guys. But this is, I would say, if you like your dark beers, you like your fruity sours, you are going to enjoy these. Yeah, you are going to enjoy these guys.
I have a suggestion. While you read the history of this, I need to check if I've had original Café Racer. Okay. So why don't you not entertain the crowd? So the history of FierceBeer. All
right, so yeah, FierceBeer are based in Dice, which is next to Aberdeen Airport, a bit to the northwestish of Aberdeen. The brewery started out its life as the homebrewing experimentations of a guy called David Grant, who worked for many, many years in the oil industry. He started homebrewing in March 2013, and after, you know, hosting like beer and food pairing dinners with a bunch of friends, you know, he got a lot of rave reviews for his beer, so he decided, well, I want to go professional. So he was joined at the brewery by another Dave McGarry, who also worked in the oil industry, but of course in sort of 2013, 2014, the oil industry went through a big downturn just when I was graduating. Life could have been so much different, you know? Basically they used the redundancy packages, they kind of combined them, and they invested in a brewery, and this was what became FierceBeer. So they trained down at Brew Lab in Sunderland, which is quite popular actually. There's a number of brewers have trained down there, but they moved into a brewery in the Kirkhill Industrial Estate, which is in Dice, right next to the airport, like I said, and they've been expanding that brewery gradually ever since. The last brewing. The last capacity figure that I have from these guys is around 800,000 litres per year, which is fairly big.
Yeah.
And they have been talking about that they want to get a more central premises in Aberdeen to open up, to turn the brewery into like a proper brew pub sort of thing. And there is a building I can think of that they would want to do that in, but I can imagine it would cost a shitload for them to convert it. There's a lovely old factory just behind Union Street in Aberdeen, but I would guess that would cost a ton to renovate, and the property's probably worth quite a lot as well. Aberdeen, for those of you who don't know, oil capital of Europe. Not that Scotland sees too much of the oil, but again, politics. But yeah, no, there's a building I could see them getting a hold of at some point. It's just paperwork and things like that. But they do have a bar in Aberdeen now, which is on Ship Row next to the View Cinema, just behind Brewdog Castlegate. I do recommend that you check that out. They've also got a bar in Edinburgh these days. And they are now producing gin apparently as well.
Really?
So yeah, there's gins, a few gins listed on the website that I checked just before this. So there's about 10 or so gins on there. So I didn't realise they started brewing spirits. But yes, guys, Scottish beer. A few breweries that I would really recommend. As I said, FierceBeer are the one if you like porters, stouts, and fruity beers. Overtone are doing some awesome IPAs these days. Dead End Brew Machine. It's an Irish guy that owns that, but they're a gypsy brewery. I would really recommend them. Vault City, Scotland's first sour beer brewery, I would recommend. Tempest are probably the best all-round brewery.
I will always love Tempest.
If you like, one of the real classic breweries would be Harveston, very local to me. If you like sessionable beers, Williams Brother, another local brewery to me. Fallon Brewing Company, spelt like Fallen. They have some very, very nice beers as well. Try to think if I've missed anyone. Cromarty always had some very nice beers as well. And Windswept they do an awesome Scotch ale called Wolf. That's one of the ones that I want to get for you guys at some point.
I'd love to try that.
So yeah. But yeah, this is very cool for me to have a go at this. I don't think
it's great. I can actually drink a Scottish beer with a Scottish person.
Yeah, I think this because I asked Thomas, do you have any Scottish beers that we could do together? Yeah. This would be quite cool.
So we're drinking this from the RampantLionReviews glass, which I also wanted you to try because I think this is one of the best glasses to drink beer from. I really love it. Now looking at it, that is a lovely sort of tan-coloured head, slight mocha tinge to it. It poured, I don't know if you saw while I was pouring it, it poured not very thick, but it's a porter. Even at 9% ABV, you don't expect a porter to be that thick compared to an Imperial Stout. But a nice dark, very dark brown colour with some, cola edges. And in the glass, of course, as you guys can see, this is as black can be. Yeah. And it looks...
I think that's the main difference between a porter and a stout. It's just the yeast, really. Yeast strain, isn't it?
And I always feel that a porter in itself is usually a bit more dry, a bit more roasty, toasty.
Yeah, well, you get robust porters and things like that. I think this will be quite smooth because it's barrel aged, to be honest with you.
But it looks the part, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yeah. It certainly does.
Let's go have a wee sniff, shall we?
Sniff, yeah.
Smell, sniff.
Ooh. That's very nice.
You know what the first thing is that I noticed in the smell? I know you have this way of doing, I do my reviews a lot differently than you do. You have this way of doing the step-by-step thing. But first thing I get is that char from the bourbon barrels.
I actually find this one very sweet.
It is quite sweet. It is sweet.
Yeah.
But there's this sort of, there's a big whiff of vanilla as well. But if you've ever smelled a freshly charred ex-bourbon barrel, when they come into Scotland, for example, Scottish whiskey is never aged on fresh barrels. It's always a pre-used barrel. And of course, bourbon barrels always need to be fresh. They can't be reused for bourbon. So a lot of bourbon barrels go to Scotland. And when they repurpose the barrel, they fix them. They see if it's leaking. They fix it a little bit, refurbish it, and they char it. And then you get this big flame in it. They do this with fresh barrels as well, and it chars it. And that charred vanilla oak, that was the first thing I got.
Yeah, see, for me, the thing for me that jumps out at this is the sweetness, because I think American bourbon whiskey is a lot sweeter than Scotch whiskey.
Absolutely.
It's and it's the same with the beers. I mean, the Americans take all these beer styles and they make them sweeter.
And you know what the weird thing is? When I have an American-made sweet stout, lactose stout, for example, it's always less sweet than the Dutch versions. It would have been great if we could. Anyway, but yeah, it's incredibly sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the woodiness you get with this. You get that the oak, the sort of slick oak kind of note. That's what forms the base of the beer.
I like that word, slick.
Yeah, because it gives it. You'll notice this in the mouthfeel probably. I always find with barrel aged beers, I think the mouthfeel of them isn't quite as thick. You sort of there's a bit of a trade off. I think you trade off mouthfeel with I think you trade off mouthfeel a little bit for the infused
This is very true. We actually we just did a live stream with the Opent beer, and Michel Oderman from Opent once explained when I asked that there's a beer they call Ongelovige Thomas, which is from the Christian religion, Thomas, the doubter. Why is that beer not barrel aged a lot? And they said when we brew a beer and we know we want to barrel age it, we overbrew it to make it too thick almost. So when we barrel age it, we know we're going to use a little bit of that, lose some mouthfeel. It's going to be a bit thinner. So when it comes from the barrel, it still has enough mouthfeel. They actually make sure that when they brew a beer, they purposefully make sure it's ready for a barrel. So when it loses some, it still has enough body. And that's one of the points you just made. You do have a trade-off. You get more flavour, you get more of an impact, you lose a little bit of body.
Yeah, I think definitely with that. This one for me though, there's a hell of a lot of brown sugar in this.
Loads.
And you do get, I think it's quite an interesting, I think there's quite a bit of complexity to the brown sugar in this, which is interesting for a porter. So for me, you've got that highly caramelised, Maillard reaction type treacle molasses thing. You've definitely got a bit of that kind of whiskey, bourbon infused sort of thing to it. And you've also got a wee bit of that almost wafer caramelly type thing.
There's a caramelly thing. I'm also getting a sort of a nutty quality. There's something in there that definitely gets a big nutty quality. What I'm missing, which I often get, because there's do you remember if Café Racer is brewed with, because they're talking about smooth espresso.
I was sure Café Racer was like, had some kind of nut in it. I was sure that Café Racer did actually have some kind of nut in it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find if there's coffee in it, but it doesn't say anything.
I don't think coffee in this now.
No, because they don't say anything about nuts or coffee being added. It doesn't say anything. The vanilla as well. The vanilla is quite pronounced, but it doesn't say anything about actually vanilla being in there. But they're talking about Madagascar vanilla. And when you use that word Madagascar in front of it,
very smooth vanilla, yeah.
Yeah, but you also expect, because they specify a specific vanilla, you think that vanilla is actually in there. It doesn't say so on that label.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, what I'm missing here, and I get that in a lot of these, these pauses and these stouts, is a sort of big jammy red fruit component. I'm not getting any red fruit here right now.
I mean, my experience of, I actually do get a little bit of red fruit out of this one.
Are you?
But my experience with some of these beers is I think that they tend to be a lot more fruity in the flavour than in the aroma.
Maybe that's it. Maybe right now, maybe in the flavour that will become full, because in the nose right now, I'm not getting a lot of it. Again, we talked about this in other reviews and films we did today about your frame of reference.
There's definitely chocolate in this for me. Absolutely. I find this quite milky and chocolatey. I think this is like maybe a 40-50% cocoa chocolate.
I was going to say the same thing, because when I think of pure chocolate, for me pure chocolate starts at 70%, right? Yeah. But a lot of the commercially available dark chocolate is usually 50. So it's a bit in between that milk chocolate, which is 30-35% cacao components. So this for me is that sort of 50%. Like it has a bit of that darker edge to it, but still sweet.
And I find with red fruits, you get those really dark, plummy, raisiny notes if you've got such a dark chocolate.
See, I'm getting more of that raisiny, dark, that plum, that figgy note, that date, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think if you take the aroma in more deeply, you really get more of the fruitiness out of it. You can smell that slight raisiny sharpness. You can get some of the plummy juiciness to this one. Yeah.
It's fantastic, though.
Yeah, it's a beautiful beer, this, I think. I do get vanilla out of this one. I think the more you smell this, you get that oaky vanilla type thing. But you're always on the dark beers. Like I say, for me, when I think of FierceBeer, it's it's the Very Big Moose, it's the Café Racer, the Peanut Riot. It's these dark beers that I think about. I like the fruit sours, but for me, it's the Scottish Sweet Tooth. It's and that was Chris Pilkington, who's the head brewer man at Poyala. He's Scottish, and he was saying that it's the Scottish Sweet Tooth.
I think FierceBeer is really incredibly underrated. When you know, and those who know keep buying it, especially the multi ones.
Yeah,
but it's an undersung hero, I feel.
Yeah, I mean FierceBeer. I would always recommend, if I was taking people a box of Scottish beer, there would always be one of the dark beers from FierceBeer in it. The fruit ones, I don't know. I would always, to be honest, I would pick the dark beers from FierceBeer.
I'll try a fruit one next time, just because you were talking about them. But for me, it would always be the dark ones. Let's have a sip of this one, shall we?
Yeah, let's go for it. Slange, let's go. Mouthfeel is definitely a porter,
but not as thin as I expected it to be.
It's a bit, yeah. I mean, the thing that strikes me about this is the smoothness.
Oh God, what is that?
The smoothness really makes this one a porter for me.
Okay, so now there's definitely the what I just said. That sort of 50% chocolate is definitely now lots of milk chocolate, vanilla, nutty, and now I'm getting that sort of jammy red fruit component. This is almost Schwarzwälder What's that? You have a different word for it. We call it Schwarzwälder Torte.
Black Forest cherry.
Black Forest cherry. You know what I mean? This is Black Forest cherry with a roasty component to it. Oof.
Yeah. I don't even know if this isn't even intended as one of these kind of pastry stout type beers at all. It's
this is sorry, yeah.
No, that was it. Yeah.
No, but this is what I feel a pastry should be. None of that over the top. Like I've been saying this. I have a. This is my soapbox. This is my stage where I do my thing. I love pastry stouts. I love lactose-driven stouts, but not the way that they're being done these days. Because it's like brewers were like, oh, people like this, but what did they like? They like the lactose component. We should up that because if they love it, they need more of it, and they destroy the beers. But these sort of soft-driven lactose pastry stouts, or where the pastry level is achieved through other means. You know what I mean? This is what I feel what a pastry porter in this case should be.
Yeah. No, I can get this. I like this. For me, this is definitely not the most robust porter that you're going to come across. It's not a robust, very strong, roasty, toasty, dry porter. It's a very smooth porter for me. Very, very smooth porter. It's almost like it has a little bit of that checked Mave kind of component to it. It's got some of the bread. I find this one, pardon me, like quite bready and smooth. So there is a little bit of that checked Mave.
I see what you mean with that bready, very, very dark. You know, you got dark bread, and then you get very dark brown bread, and you got that very deep dark brown
German rye bread almost.
A German rye bread. You know, I there's no rye in this.
Definitely not, but it tastes like a rye bread.
Yeah. Exactly. It's got that rye component without that sharp note from the rye. Yeah. Which is ingenious in a way.
So I mean, for me, base layer of beer is that oaky wood. And it's got a bit of slickness to it. You can feel that. It's almost a little bit like glaze, a little bit of that oaky slickness. And on top of that, your next layer, middle third of your tongue, back third of your tongue, it's that kind of brown bready, rye bready kind of thing. If you go towards the very back third of your palate, I think there's a bit more graininess to it. It does feel almost a little touch bitter. And then if you move into the middle third of your palate, I think you start to feel a bit of a roasty, cherry type thing evolving out of this beer.
Because now that I'm waiting a little bit, the things that are much more prominent are caramel and that espresso, roasty, toasty bitterness. And especially for those who know good espresso, real espresso, not, you know, I got this little sachet with a little bit of boiling water over it. I mean, a real espresso has this most intense roasted bitterness. And then you get these specialty coffees with a little bit of caramel added to it, and that's what...
There's something telling me in this that I said something wrong earlier. And I've got a feeling that Café Racer, I've got a feeling that is actually a coffee porter.
I think so. You want me to look it up?
I'm pretty sure Café Racer is a coffee porter. So I think I've told you a lie earlier that this one doesn't have coffee in it. I'm sure there's something in my head that's saying that this does have coffee beans added to it. And Café Racer, like I said, is one of their core range beers. I'm sure I've never reviewed that on the channel for you, and that's something that I need to sort.
As should I. I mean, that could be a great live stream for the both of us, by the way. By the way, guys, if I'm looking at the weird... new phone, new camera, I'm not sure where to look right now. So if sometimes I'm like, where is he? It looks like, where am I looking? But Café... Sorry, yeah?
Well, as I said, for me, I was having a wee yawn. I'm feeling tired. But the one thing I think you'll notice from this as well is that if you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you start to get a little bit more, beyond the roastiness, I think the vanilla starts to come out there. But on top of that, you're starting to get the chocolate, and for me, I think it's about maybe a 50-60% chocolate on this. I have to admit, I think I disagree with you a little bit on, you were saying milky chocolate.
Right, in the beginning, when I'm tasting it, it's an ever-changing palate. Still trying to look up Imperial oh crikey, wrong one.
So for me, I would say, yeah, on top of that breadiness, I think there is a sort of, there is a little bit of that. There's a mix. It's interesting because I'm getting more of the brown sugar now. You can feel that sort of wafery, caramelly thing there.
So Madagascar vanilla,
coffee vanilla porter.
Definitely, it had to be. By the way, apparently it doesn't say so, but the original beer is apparently a collab with Devil's Peak Brewing Company.
Oh, from South Africa, Johannesburg.
And here's the thing, though. I am 99% certain I've had the original one, but I might have not checked it in.
I've seen the original one around a lot. I had no idea that that was a collaboration with Devil's Peak.
Because I'm reading all of that information.
Because Devil's Peak are from Johannesburg in South Africa. You know, there was I don't know if he still does them, but when I was researching that, there is actually a South African beer tuber.
Really?
Yeah.
What's
I don't know what his name is, but I remember there is one. We should look him up.
That's
actually, that'd be cool to connect with him. Yeah. But I didn't know that about this. But yeah, for me, this one, I think this gets woodier and more woody, and I find that the brown sugar, that sort of caramelly wafer thing, comes out of it more the further you go into it. The chocolate's there, and I would say about 50% cocoa chocolate there. And I think that sits on top of the bready things I was talking about. For me, caramel wafer, there's a directly sweet caramel in the centre of the palate, and then the chocolate for me sits on top of it. And it's almost got a little bit of that kind of sort of powdery, hot chocolatey, powder type chocolate kind of thing going on.
I will agree with you that when you go further into the finish, and we talked about this in the other beer that we did a review of, in the back, at some point, you know, the bitterness, the char, the roast. In the front, for me, that chocolate component with the caramel makes it really, really milky, creamy chocolate. When you get a little bit further into the back, that chocolate evolves together with the espresso roasted bitterness that's coming, turns it into a darker chocolate. For me, in the front, it's really that. We got some milk chocolate. Maybe we should try that. It could be fun, by the way, trying this with some milk chocolate. We could do that after the review.
Yeah.
But if we agree and disagree on that chocolate component, there is a chocolate component, very heavily.
I don't think the vanilla is as obvious in this, though, when this is a coffee vanilla porter.
Could that be because vanilla could be one of those adjuncts that fades a little bit after time?
And you're also going to get it from the wood as well, in fairness.
True.
The coffee for me, I can get a little bit of the coffee, because the thing with the coffee is you get that roasty note, but it's also very smooth. You also have Carafa malt from Weirmann and Bamberg that's going to give you a very similar component to that. And Carafa is a Weirmann trademark, incidentally. So if you ever have Carafa malt, it's always from Weirmann and Bamberg. So I mean, I get a little bit of that, but I think that the sort of coffee-ish notes might be blending a bit with the bread, the brown rye bread thing.
Yeah, but that's where we get back to that pastry portion of the show. When you talk about pastry in itself, I'm not talking about pastry beer. When you're talking about pastry, like a tart, a cake, whatever, all the flavors have to combine. That nothing really is overpowering everything. You get hints of everything. So here, there's definitely that coffee component, but the coffee component for me isn't literally like a sip of dark, fresh coffee. It's what you said, is that sort of bitterness in the back, a little bit of roasty, toasty from the espresso component. Yeah. It's not like I'm actually drinking coffee. So there is probably where, I've talked about this in other reviews, where barrel aging is an art in itself. And you need to keep on tasting the beer. Is it at its point right now? And I think they canned this at the exact right point, where the barrel didn't overpower. The original beer may have lost some of its strength, but blended very well with the barrel. And that all depends on which barrels are you using, the strength of the barrel, the strength of the beer. And that's the magic of, you know, barrel aging. People think like, I put a beer in a barrel, leave it there for a while, I'm going to sell it and it's going to be great. It's going to be great, it's going to be perfect. It's the best barrel of beer ever.
I think on that note, it's a good opportunity to talk about the hoppy side of the beer as well. Because this is one of the things you always get with barrel aged beers. The hops are always going to drop out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what hop they would have used in this. I don't think it's an English hop. I think it's an American hop in this. But you do in the back corners of the palate. For me, it's got a fair little bit of earthiness to it. That lingers there, but you can feel as you move further forward. There are a few elements of floral qualities to this one, and then it's grassy around the front edge of the tongue.
Floral.
I actually find this one.
This
does have a bit of floral quality to it.
Very.
But I don't think this is English hopped. I mean, it would be, what would it be? It'd be, Bramling's Cross would be a good choice for a porter, because then you'd get the fruity component. But the thing is, if it's aged in barrels, did you say 9 months?
9 months.
Well, then most of your hoppy character is going to drop out after that, so you're going to be left with the earthy and the grassy and floral components. So I'd be curious to know what hops, but I think with the level of floral quality you get with this, it has to be an American hop. I don't think you're going to get that from an English hop.
This is definitely much more of an aromatic hop than just
Summit, maybe. Summit.
Could be.
Summit, yeah.
This is not just something used for a little bit of bittering and whatever. This is definitely something to impart a little bit of flavour.
Yeah.
And I think if you're talking about a beer where you're going to, want to compete with Madagascar vanilla, I'm not talking about the barrel-aged version now, just the non-barrel-aged, but if you want to brew a beer with a 9% ABV, with the coffee and the vanilla, and you want to make sure that the hops aren't just there for a little bit of bittering, because you're going to get the bittering from the roasted malts, the espresso. You want the bittering to have the hop to do more than just bittering. You want to impart some flavour. You have to look for something that works with everything. Yeah. And that sort of floral component here.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that. Fruity side of the beer, I think.
There's more fruit coming now. When I smelled it, I said, that's expectations. I wasn't really getting anything of the red fruit, but it's there now. I
think it's quite figgy in the aftertaste. I think
Absolutely.
It's a light kind of figgy note, but when you take it in, when you take that in, that's definitely more raisiny for me. It quickly kind of evolves to be a bit more juicy and plummy, and then I think it's the raisiny notes that sort of, the figgy notes that kind of linger there. But on the front tip of your tongue almost. So let's look at this. We'll do my fruity thing again. So I think at the back of your palate, a little bit of a more kind of sharper raisiny note, and it becomes a bit more plummy. Then as you move further forward, a bit more figgy, and as you reach the front part of your palate, and for me, the tip of my tongue is it gets a lot of. You need to stop that. I always find that the flavours I get on the end of the tongue are quite oily, and it's quite blackcurranty and blackberry for me. I think, and you go further into that blackcurranty and blackberry. But I think that the flavour that really lingers for me is and I actually get more when you go further into the aftertaste. I do get more of that kind of cakey thing, that sort of dark cakey, almost like Christmas pudding. I don't know how what good reference that is for you.
We don't really have that here, but I do know what you're saying, because Christmas pudding has a lot of those dried fruits. You got some of those. You got a bit of that spice element as well, like your cinnamon, a little bit of your nutmeg. I'm not saying that's in there, but there is that resonance of it. That sort of, this actually would be. Can you imagine Christmas Day, and everybody's gone? You've had your entire day. You've had your Christmas dinner. You've had your Christmas pudding, and everybody's gone. You had your cheeses, and the house is nearly empty, and you're going to wind down.
This is what you want, yeah.
This is an extremely lovely beer for that Christmas day. Hopefully the fire's on. And you just sort of go away and go to your own place and say, fuck all after that.
Yeah.
Because we all love Christmas, and in the end of the day, when Christmas is done, you're all like, I'm never doing this again.
That's it, yeah. That's it. But I think fruitiness for me starts off sharp, gets a little bit more figgy. I don't really get much of the phenolic, medicinal type thing out of this, but then it's a bit more blackcurranty, blackberry in the aftertaste. Yeah.
When we talked about that jammy component, that red fruit component, maybe my expectations was that really red fruit, like strawberries and cherries that I get in a lot of those stouts and porters, but now that you're talking about that, this is that forest fruit component. Like you mentioned, those blackcurrants, those berries. Yeah. This is much more like a forest fruit jam, forest fruit. Again, the what would you call the cake again? What I mentioned?
Black Forest.
The Black Forest.
Black Forest cherry cake.
Yeah. And with the Black Forest, you also get a little bit of creamy component, and that's that smooth, soft, creamy mouthfeel that you get. Because I have to admit, for 9% ABV porter, I was expecting, and one that's been barrel aged for 9 months, I was expecting less of a mouthfeel. Now it's not bold and potent, but it's still smooth.
Yeah, I would still say that's a smooth. It's a smooth porter beer, this one. So we should, on that note, I think we should do mouthfeel. Again, for me, this is top end of mid body, bottom end of full body. It's kind of in that sort of region. Smooth carbonation, as I say, for me, this is a very smooth porter. And I think that's the barrel aging component that really gives you the smoothness out of this one. I think it's the woodiness that you get out of this. You notice that the woodiness in this beer really evolves out of it, that smooth, oaky sort of thing. You do get a little bit of charriness to this beer. So there's almost a little touch of leatheriness kind of comes out of this the more I think about it.
It has that many porters have that sort of, I'm keeping an eye on the camera to make sure it goes over the 30 minutes, and it just did. Sorry for the long review, guys, but James, this is normal for James, by the way. You guys are already like, oh, it's 12 minutes. That's a Thomas Opent review. You guys, really? Grab a book, grab a beer, take your time. In the back, really in the back, there's that sort of soft, leathery tobacco association that I have with many porters.
See, that's a descriptor I very rarely use, tobacco, because I'm just like, I never smoked in my life.
Good for you, really. Yeah. Seriously, I'm proud of you because you really should never smoke kids.
Yeah, my grandmother used to smoke. Yeah, it's just something that she always used to tell me, don't do it.
No, but there's, for me, smoke, by the way, there's a difference between a cigarette and tobacco. Tobacco is high-end cigars, pipe tobacco, things like that.
No. The smell of tobacco I got offered a job at when I was graduating, I got offered a job at British American Tobacco, and I was like, nah. So as an analytical chemist, I was like, no.
So we talked about mouthfeel. We basically talked about everything. Here's the thing, though, and we haven't talked about this in our reviews yet. I talked about this with you earlier today and yesterday. I hardly ever drink a beer several times, more than once, because there's so many beers to try. Every month, so many new beers hit the market, from your lagers to your high-end, high ABV, barrel-aged stouts. Would you want to drink this again? Would you buy this on a whim if you saw this in a bottle shop and you're like, damn it, I remember that one, I want to have it again? Because I believe this was about €6.
I mean, for me, I would. I mean, the thing with Fierce is they're so experimental. I'd just be like, I'd want to try something different. But in terms of quality, I mean, that's not intended as a knock against the quality of the beer. I mean, for me, I never buy the same beer more than once, apart from maybe, like I said to you, Leffe and Pilsner Urquell are go-tos for me.
Yeah.
And Fierce for me are so experimental that I probably would never buy the same beer again. But in terms of, I would never knock this in terms of its quality.
The thing with Fierce, though, it could be very well you see Imperial Café Porter barrel aged and you buy it and you're like, great, I remember that. And then you come home and you suddenly see it's batch 20.3. They might have used different barrels now. Maybe they went from Madagascar vanilla to, I don't know what kind of vanilla you have, different kind of espresso. Different kind of whiskey, bourbon barrels, because it says bourbon barrels. It doesn't say which ones. Maybe these are Wild Turkey. Next time they're going to use Heaven Hill.
Maybe
that's the thing with what you said, the experimental nature. Having said that, though, for me, Fierce plus malt plus barrel usually equals win.
It does. Yeah. No, that, as I said to you guys, Fierce, I would always associate these guys with their dark beers. I think it's the flick over thing.
We'll see.
But Fierce, I would honestly say when it comes to dark beers, I would always recommend these guys. And yeah, I'm a bit jealous. I wish I could review more Fierce beers on my channel, which we don't get many in Scandinavia. Even in Copenhagen, they are a little bit difficult to get a hold of. So I was quite, it was just when you said you had one of these and it was a Fierce beer, quite local to me from where I studied. This one was like, yep, it was. This was a nice one. I really enjoy this, and it just kind of shows you Fierce. Yeah, I would always recommend these guys if you're interested in Scottish beer,
and especially if you're interested in good barrel aged or non barrel aged dark beers, be it the stouts, be it the barley wines, be it the porters. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And on that bombshell,
it's time to go back to the studio. No.
James, thank you very much for joining me in this review.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we made it a little bit longer, but I hope that you guys enjoyed that. My reviews are always... Basically, my reviews are basically like a thoughtful ramble almost. That's probably a fair way to describe them.
Very fair.
Thoughtful
as you are.
Head full of rubbish. There you go.
Guys, thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. In the description box below, you'll find a link to James's channel, RampantLionReviews. If you liked the video, click like. If you really liked it, click subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe to James's channel. There will be links to all of my social media as well, links to the Dutch Beer Collective, and I'll see all of you guys in another review soon. Cheers!